The streets of Abuja glittered with city lights, but for Zainab, they were cold and unwelcoming. She stood outside the grand mansion where she had worked for 3 years, her small bag clutched in trembling hands. The door slammed behind her, the echo of Madame Folek's angry voice ringing in her ears. "You ungrateful thing! How dare you look me in the eye and talk back? Get out, and don't ever come back." Zainab's heart pounded as she tried to process what had just happened. One moment, she had been scrubbing the marble floors, and the next, she had been accused of stealing Madame Folek's missing gold necklace. She hadn't taken anything, but in a house where the word of a poor maid meant nothing, she had no way to defend herself. With nowhere to go and just a few naira in her pocket, she wandered the streets of Wus aimlessly. The city that once felt like a place of opportunity now seemed like a dark pit of despair. Night fell, and Abuja's vibrant streets grew quieter. Zainab found herself in Area 1, curled up on a bench, shivering from the night breeze. Her stomach rumbled in protest, reminding her that she had not eaten all day. She had grown up in Kogi State, where her grandmother had raised her after her parents died in a car accident. When her grandmother passed away, she had come to Abuja to work as a maid, hoping for a better life. But now, she was worse off than before. As she lay there, staring at the distant glow of the city skyline, she whispered, "There has to be more to life than this." The next morning, hunger gnawed at her insides, forcing her to swallow her pride. She wandered to a busy junction, watching people rush past her. Businessmen in suits, women in elegant dresses, drivers honking impatiently. Just as she was about to give up, a woman selling akara noticed her. "My dear, you look tired. Have this," she said, handing Zainab a piece of warm akara. Tears stung Zainab's eyes. "Thank you, Ma. May Allah bless you." The woman smiled. "Everyone has a journey. Yours is not over yet. Keep pushing." Zainab clung to those words. She knew she had to find a way to survive, to prove to herself and to the world that she was worth more than how she had been treated. As she sat near a taxi park, trying to gather her thoughts, a sleek black Range Rover pulled up nearby. The door opened, and a tall, well-dressed man stepped out. He looked powerful, like someone who controlled the city. Zainab wasn't sure why, but something about him made her freeze. And then, to her shock, he turned in her direction and started walking toward her. Zainab's heart pounded as the tall man in the black Range Rover approached her. His polished shoes clicked against the pavement, and his neatly tailored suit spoke of power and wealth. She swallowed nervously, unsure why he was walking toward her. "Are you okay?" His voice was deep, smooth, and laced with curiosity. Zainab hesitated before nodding. "Yes. No, She caught herself, embarrassed. What was she supposed to say? That she had been thrown out of her job, had nowhere to go, and was now living on the streets? The man's sharp eyes scanned her face, taking in her worn-out clothes and tired expression. Then, without another word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp N5,000 note. "Here," he said, holding it out to her. Zainab's pride kicked in. She had never begged for money, and she didn't want to start now. "Thank you, sir, but I can't accept it." The man raised an eyebrow, seemingly amused. "You have nothing, and yet you refuse help?" She nodded, lifting her chin slightly. I don't want handouts. I just need a job. For a moment, he said nothing, just stared at her with something unreadable in his expression. Then, he put the money back into his pocket and tilted his head. Come with me. Zainab hesitated. Why? I own several businesses in Abuja. Maybe I have a job for you. Her breath hitched. Was this a trap? Could she trust him? But what choice did she have? She needed to survive. Taking a deep breath, she followed him to his car. Zainab had never been inside such a luxurious car before. The leather seats smelled fresh, and the air conditioning provided a comfort she hadn't felt in days. As they drove through the bustling streets of Abuja, she stole glances at the man beside her. What's your name? He asked. Zainab, she replied softly. And you, sir? He gave a small smile. I'm Khalid Danjuma. Zainab's eyes widened slightly. She had heard of him before, one of Abuja's most successful young billionaires. He owned hotels, restaurants, and real estate properties. Why was he helping her? They arrived at a grand-looking restaurant in Maitama, one of the richest areas in Abuja. As they stepped inside, the scent of grilled meat and fresh spices filled the air. The staff greeted Khalid with deep respect, and he led Zainab to an office upstairs. I need a waitress here, he said, sitting on the edge of his desk. No experience required. You'll start tomorrow. Zainab's heart swelled with gratitude. Thank you so much, sir. I promise I won't disappoint you. He studied her for a moment before nodding. Good, then let's see what you can do. Zainab had no idea that this was just the beginning of a journey that would change her life forever. The next morning, Zainab arrived at Danjuma's Dine, one of Khalid's most prestigious restaurants in Abuja. The grandeur of the place overwhelmed her. The chandeliers sparkled like tiny stars, and the waiters glided smoothly in crisp uniforms. Zainab, follow me, the restaurant manager, Madame Gray, said in a clipped tone. She was a tall, no-nonsense woman with piercing eyes. You will start from the bottom, clean tables, serve water, and pay attention. Zainab nodded, determined to prove herself. The first few hours were rough. Customers barked orders at her. Madame Gray scolded her for walking too slowly, and her legs ached from running back and forth. But she gritted her teeth and pushed through. As she wiped down a table, she heard a deep voice behind her. How's your first day? She turned and found Khalid watching her, a slight smirk on his face. I'm managing, sir, she said, straightening up. Khalid chuckled. Good, keep at it. Zainab felt a strange sense of pride. She wasn't just given a job, she was earning it. Later that evening, as she was leaving the restaurant, she heard a familiar, sneering voice. Well, well, look at the runaway maid. Her blood ran cold. Madame Folake stood before her, her eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. Beside her was her daughter, Tosin, who crossed her arms with a smirk. I see you found a new place to beg, Madame Folake sneered. I am not begging, Zainab said, holding her head high. I work here now. Madame Folake's eyes narrowed. You're still nothing. Do you think working in a restaurant will change your fate? Zainab clenched her fists, but refused to be broken again. She simply walked past them, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her react. As she reached the gate, she spotted Khalid standing by his car, watching the exchange. His gaze was unreadable. "You know them?" he asked. Zainab sighed. "They're my past, but I don't plan on letting them ruin my future." Khalid nodded approvingly. "Good answer." Zainab worked harder than ever, eager to prove her worth. The staff at Danjuma's Dine started noticing her effort. Even Madame Grace, who had been tough on her, began to nod in approval. One evening, Khalid walked into the restaurant with an important-looking client. He sat at a table near where Zainab was working. "Zainab, take their orders," Madame Grace instructed. Zainab's heart pounded as she approached. She had never directly served Khalid before. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Danjuma's Dine," she said, forcing a polite smile. Khalid raised an eyebrow, but his expression softened. "Thank you, Zainab. Surprise me with something good." She quickly took their orders, making sure to write everything down. When she brought their meals, Khalid's client smiled. "You have a sharp waitress here." "She's learning fast," Khalid said, his gaze lingering on her. "I like that." Zainab's chest warmed with pride. That night, as Zainab was about to leave, Khalid stopped her. "Come with me," he said. Zainab hesitated. "Sir?" He gestured toward his car. "There's something that I want to show you." Nervous but curious, she followed him. The drive was silent, but soon they arrived at a large, elegant building. As Khalid led her inside, Zainab's breath caught in her throat. This is a hotel," she whispered in awe. Khalid smiled. "One of my hotels. And one day, if you prove yourself, you might manage something like this." Zainab's eyes widened. "You think I can?" Khalid's voice was firm. "I know you can." Tears pricked her eyes. This was more than just a job. It was an opportunity to rewrite her future. Zainab couldn't sleep that night. Khalid's words echoed in her mind. "One day, if you prove yourself, you might manage something like this." Was it really possible? Could a former maid rise so high? Determined to make something of herself, she arrived at Danjuma's Dine earlier than usual. Madame Grace raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as Zainab began organizing tables and polishing silverware before the restaurant even opened. "You have fire in you," the older woman finally muttered. "Let's see if you can keep it burning." That day, she handled rush hour orders without a single mistake. She memorized the preferences of regular customers. Even the toughest guests left satisfied. At the end of her shift, Madame Grace gave her a rare nod of approval. "You might just make it, girl," she said. Zainab's chest swelled with pride. She was no longer just a helpless girl thrown out on the streets. She was fighting for a new life. A week later, Khalid returned to the restaurant, this time alone. As Zainab approached to take his order, he studied her carefully. "You're different," he observed. Zainab straightened. "I'm learning, sir." Khalid nodded. "Good, but there's more to success than just working hard." He pushed a small envelope toward her. "Be at the Pearl Grand Hotel tomorrow at 7 p.m. Wear something nice." Zainab blinked, stunned. "Sir?" "You'll see," he said before walking out. Zainab had never been to the Pearl Grand Hotel. She had seen it from afar, towering over Maitama, its golden lights glowing like a palace. And now she was going inside. With the little money she had saved, she bought a simple but elegant dress. As she stepped out of the taxi in front of the hotel, she felt like she was in a dream. The doorman let her in with a respectful nod, and a staff member led her to a private dining area. Khalid was already there, dressed in an expensive suit. He stood as she entered, gesturing for her to sit. "Why am I here?" she asked nervously. Khalid smirked. "Because I see potential in you, Zainab, and I want to teach you something tonight. How to navigate the world of the wealthy." The dinner wasn't just a meal, it was a lesson. Khalid taught her how to read body language, how to speak with confidence, and how to handle powerful people. "This world is different from where you come from," he explained. "People judge you by how you carry yourself. If you want to rise, you need to learn their ways." Zainab listened carefully, absorbing every word. By the end of the night, she felt like a different person. "Thank you," she whispered as they left the hotel. Khalid studied her for a moment before replying, "You're stronger than you know, Zainab." The following weeks passed in a blur. Zainab continued working hard at Danjuma's dine, but now she carried herself differently. She spoke with more confidence. She handled difficult customers with grace. And every time Khalid visited, he watched her with quiet approval. But something else was happening too. Something neither of them wanted to admit. A silent tension grew between them. It was in the way Khalid's eyes lingered on her a little too long. The way Zainab's heart skipped when he praised her progress. But neither spoke about it. Because in their world, love was dangerous. Just when things were going well, trouble came knocking. One evening, Zainab returned to her tiny apartment to find the door slightly open. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside, and then she froze. Sitting on her small mattress was Madame Folake, and she wasn't alone. 2 police officers stood beside her. "Well, well," Madame Folake sneered. "I told you that you wouldn't escape, girl." Zainab's blood ran cold. "What do you want?" Madame Folake smirked. "I'm here to make sure you pay for what you stole." The police officer stepped forward. "Miss Zainab, you are under arrest for the theft of valuable jewelry from Madame Folake's residence." Zainab's world spun. She hadn't stolen anything, but now she was being dragged into the nightmare she thought she had escaped, and she had no idea if Khalid would come to save her. Zainab's hands trembled as the cold metal cuffs clicked around her wrists. Her heart pounded as the police officers led her out of her tiny apartment. The neighbors peeked through their windows, whispering among themselves, This is a mistake. I didn't steal anything." She protested, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. Madame Folake smirked. "Tell that to the judge, thief." At the police station, she was thrown into a small, dimly lit cell. The stench of sweat and hopelessness filled the air. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to cry. She had survived worse. She would survive this too. Zainab sat on the cold floor, her arms wrapped around her knees. Hours passed, and then a guard approached her cell. "You have one call." Her fingers shook as she dialed the only number she could think of, Khalid's. The line rang twice before his deep voice answered. "Hello?" She inhaled shakily. "Sir, I need help." There was a pause. "Where are you?" In police custody. Another pause. Then his voice came sharp and firm. I'm on my way. Within an hour, Khalid arrived at the station, his presence commanding respect. He walked straight to the officer in charge. What's the charge? Theft, the officer said. A woman named Madame Folklores filed a complaint. Khalid's jaw tightened. Release her, now. The officer hesitated. Sir, I will pay whatever bail is necessary, but if you do not release her, I will have my lawyers dismantle this station brick by brick. Moments later, Zainab was free, but as she stepped out into the cool Abuja night, she felt no relief, just fear. What if she does something worse? She whispered. Khalid's expression darkened. Then we fight back. The next day, Khalid arranged a meeting with his lawyers. They needed proof that Zainab was innocent. Madame Folklores had power, but Khalid had more. One of his private investigators dug into the case. Sir, he said, handing over a file. Madame Folklores pawned the jewelry 2 weeks ago. We have receipts. Zainab gasped. She lied. Khalid smirked. Let's see how she handles this. Armed with evidence, Khalid's team filed charges of defamation and false accusation against Madame Folklores. When the news broke, her reputation shattered overnight. She stormed into Khalid's office. How dare you interfere? Khalid leaned back in his chair, calm as ever. Consider this a warning. If you ever come near Zainab again, I will make sure you lose everything. Madame Folklores left in a rage, but Zainab knew she wouldn't be a problem anymore. With the nightmare over, Zainab returned to work at Danjuma's dine. She worked harder than ever, earning the respect of everyone around her. One evening, as she was closing up, Khalid appeared at the door. Come with me. She hesitated. Where? You'll see. Khalid drove her to a brand new restaurant. The sign outside read Zainab's Bistro. Her breath caught. What is this? Khalid smiled. Your new beginning. Tears filled her eyes. I don't understand. I see your potential, Zainab. You deserve more than just surviving. You deserve to thrive. Owning a restaurant wasn't easy, but Zainab was determined to succeed. With Khalid's mentorship and her hard work, Zainab's Bistro quickly became one of the most talked about restaurants in Abuja. She was no longer a maid, no longer a helpless girl. She was a businesswoman. One evening, Khalid arrived at the restaurant late. He looked restless. Can we talk? Zainab nodded, leading him to a private room. I never expected this, he admitted. But somewhere along the way, I found myself caring about you more than I should. Zainab's heart pounded. Khalid, he exhaled. I know I have power, but with you I feel powerless. Zainab wrestled with her emotions. She admired Khalid, but could she allow herself to love him? Would their worlds ever truly align? Madame Grace warned her. Love in the business world is dangerous. Be careful. But when she looked into Khalid's eyes, she knew some risks were worth taking. Months passed, and Khalid stood by her side through every challenge. One night, after the restaurant's anniversary celebration, he pulled out a small box. Zainab gasped as he knelt. I don't want to just help you build your future. I want to be part of it. Will you marry me? Tears filled her eyes. Yes. The wedding was a grand affair, attended by Abuja's elite. But for Zainab, it wasn't about the riches, it was about the journey. From a maid to a CEO, from the street to the stars. Standing in the grand home she now shared with Khalid, Zainab thought about her past. She had suffered, but she had never given up. And that made all the difference. Zainab looked at herself in the mirror. The girl who had once been thrown out with nothing was now a woman of power, standing beside a man who had believed in her. She smiled, whispering, "I am no longer just a survivor. I am a queen." And with that, her journey from tears to diamonds was complete. Subscribe for more African folk tales. Like, share, and comment.